Greetings friends, Dragon here once again. The sky is high, the cloud is low, but the YouTube game is hard to beat, so do please consider giving me a subscribe, a like and a comment, all that good stuff, because it really does help the channel immensely. Okay, today following on with our getting into the 3 films of Sammo Hung box set, released through Eureka in the UK, so it's a Region B release. Yesterday we covered Iron Fist and Monk. Today moving on to The Magnificent Butcher from 1979, directed by Yuen Woo-ping and starring Sammo Hung. This is an attempt by Golden Harvest to really capitalise on the success that seasonal films had had with Yuen Woo-ping's 2 hugely popular movies, Sneak and Eagle Shadow and Drunken Master, a year earlier. So they kind of wanted to try and explore some of the same territory with some of the same characters. So they wanted to do their own Wong Fei-hung film, but tried to up seasonal by casting the actual Wong Fei-hung, or certainly the actual cinematic Wong Fei-hung, Quan Tak-hing, who'd played the character in over 70 black and white movies. So they brought him into the cast here to try and kind of up the stakes or up the game for their own version. Wasn't financially quite as successful. It took just over $4 million, just under $4 million Hong Kong dollars. When it was released, Drunken Master, by comparison, took $6.8 million the year before for a much smaller company, so it was a much bigger financial success. I'm not going to get too much into the plot, because this is a film that's largely made up of a lot of lies, a lot of cases of mistaken identity, and a huge amount of jumping to false conclusions, and I will twist myself in knots if I attempt to try and explain it. So I would say if you haven't seen the film, you're probably safe to watch the vid. It's not going to be that spoiler heavy. I'll mostly just cover the cast and try and give an overview of whether this should be one that you should track down. Our synopsis, based on the back of the box, tells us that The Magnificent Butcher was directed by the legendary Yuen Woo-ping as a spiritual successor to his earlier smash hit Drunken Master. Magnificent Butcher stars Sammo as Butcher Lam Sai-wing, a pupil of Wong Fei-hung, the role Jackie Chan portrayed in Drunken Master, but here being played by Quan Tak-hing, who played the legendary folk hero in over 70 films. When Lam is framed for murder by a rival clan, he must track down the real murderer and fight to clear his name. To be strong enough to have a chance of winning, he must train under the original Drunken Master, Beggar Soul, presented from a brand new 2K restoration. Okay, so yeah, as the case tells us, the Beggar Soul character makes another appearance here, and the original plan was for him to be played by the same actor, to be played by Yun Shih-chin, Yuen Woo-ping's real-life father, and who unfortunately died about 2 weeks into production of a heart attack. So there was a hasty reshuffling of the cast, and they had to recast the part of Beggar Soul. So Fan Mei Shang stepped in to play the part, finds a way to make it his own, which I would say he definitely does. It's a much more mischievous, a slightly less sadistic Beggar Soul than we saw in Drunken Master. A little bit more good-natured, a little bit more big-hearted, a bit quicker to help people. And the film, as a sort of example of kind of kung fu comedy, it's a lot more light-hearted than the Iron-Fisted Monk that we looked at yesterday. The comedy beats work a bit better, and it's certainly got a lot less of the darkness that we saw. While still having a couple of slightly rapey elements, it's nowhere near as dark as the Iron-Fisted Monk was. Fung Har-kon is again playing villain here, and he's the one responsible for seeding most of the lies and causing most of the cases of mistaken identity and making people jump to false conclusions. So he's probably the main villain who's driving through the narrative. There is a kind of a top-level boss in the form of Ho Sang-lee's character, Master Ko, who's certainly the main more powerful kung fu force that we'll kind of see throughout the film, and ultimately who Sammo has to face, but he's really being manipulated by his son, played by Fung Har-kon. He's playing Ku Tai Hoi. So like we say, the narrative of the film is pretty twisty, and largely centers around Lam Sai-wing being framed by Fung Har-kon's character for a murder, and then having to attempt to try and clear his name, but really along the way it's much more about the relationship between him and the Beggar Soul character, the training that he has to do. Some standout sequences. The first time that we see Master Ko confronting the aged Wong Fei-hung is pretty spectacular. There's a great calligraphy kind of fight, I guess you could call it, or really more of a schooling that happens with Wong Fei-hung kind of teaching Master Ko, and teaching him a lesson is maybe more appropriate to say, through calligraphy. It's a really well staged scene. There's some tremendous little cameos stroke co-starring from Yuen Biao and from Wei Pei, the ex-Shaw Brothers Venom Mob employee. So the snake from the Five Venoms shows up here as one of Sammo Hung's classmates. We also have A very brief appearance from Lam Chi-ying, who we recognise from Mr. Vampire, playing one of the villains who is working for Master Ko and wields a fan. It's a pretty spectacular sequence the first time they go to try and storm Ko Chi Lam. So when they go to Wong Fei Hung's school when he's not there and have to kind of deal with the pupils. So there's some great training sequences, nothing quite as elaborate as we saw in Drunken Master. It comes a little bit later in the film and runs a little bit shorter, with Beggar Soul kind of teaching Lam Sai Wing a few moves that his master hasn't shown him, so he's going to be more able to protect himself. It was written by Edward Tang, who I think was one of the main writers that Sammo liked to work with on a pretty regular occurrence. And overall, it's just a really, really great slice of 1970s Kung Fu. It feels, there's no percentage score that we were able to do with the Iron Fisted Monk because it doesn't appear in that guide, but it feels like it's a lot more loaded, where there's a huge amount more action sequences spread throughout the film, and they're all pretty great. It's a lot more hand-to-hand based. There are a couple of villains that wield weapons that Sammo will go up against at various points, but for the most part, this is all really largely hand-to-hand, and as a sort of testament to the Hung Gar style of Kung Fu, which was what Wong Fei Hung was traditionally most well known for, that type of Southern martial arts. It's really very much on display here. So you kind of see most of the forms being displayed by Sammo, which is kind of nice to see. You don't often see him doing such traditional kind of Kung Fu shapes, quite to the sort of extent he would kind of further explore Wing Chun in a few other movies, but this really is all about Hung Gar style, so the five animals, or the tiger and the crane predominantly. So there's a huge amount of that being used here, and it's all really good. It's kind of great to see. It has that typical Yuen Wu Ping style to it, which is fairly acrobatic and pretty bombastic in how it's delivered. So there's a lot of flips, a lot of somersaults, a lot of using the environment. So you kind of see people being pushed and thrown into tables and kind of using some of these things as props for the fight. But overall, it's just really, really good. I think between the two, the choreography in this is better than we saw in Iron Fisted Monk, but the fights maybe aren't quite as brutal as some of the ones that we saw there, but better performances by all involved. So it's a lot tighter. It flows a lot better as a film. And it's more enjoyable between the two. I think the Iron Fisted Monk's still a really great Kung Fu movie, but this is slightly better overall. I think it shows that you can have a higher budget behind them and a bit more experience from what Sammo had kind of gone through when he was making the Iron Fisted Monk. This feels very much like a step up for him. He's also playing a much more likeable character here. I think kind of Lam Sai Wing's a character that fits his physique and his personality really well, and he's strikes the tone really well between comedy and action sequences. So I think overall it's a movie that I would hold up equally with Drunken Master for being really a great example of that genre of Kung Fu, or that era of Kung Fu rather. Highly, highly recommended overall. I would kind of give it, 9 little piglets out of 10. Extras wise, we get a commentary track. This time it is by Mike Leader and Arnie Venema. We also get 2 archival interviews with Sammo Hung, I think both pulled from the original Hong Kong Legends DVD release, and an interview with Yuen Wu Ping. So that's our main extra features for the disc. Commentary overall is pretty good. Arnie and Mike's commentaries are always a little bit more informal, kind of more of a chat really between 2 friends who, in Mike Leader's case, really passionately loves the film. I can always get the sense that he's maybe the bigger Kung Fu fan between the 2 of them. I'll leave a link below to Onion San's YouTube channel if anybody wants to check out the original Hong Kong Legends commentary track for comparison. But I find it's best to just have the best of both worlds, have the older commentary as well as the newer, better quality release is really ideal. Really one that I thoroughly enjoy. Looking forward to getting into Eastern Condors tomorrow. If you've not yet entered my Spooky Encounters competition, please do that. We'll be back in again tomorrow with another review, and thank you very, very much for watching. Take care.